I got a call to remove bees from one of the weirdest places ever, this toilet. The bees had been living in the tank of this toilet for years, and they filled the entire space with comb and had no room left to grow. So I got to work removing the hive. Everything I removed from the original hive was safe for the bees to have in their new home. Here's what the comb looked like. This piece had honey at the top, pollen below, and brood on the bottom. I spent a lot of time carefully removing each piece of comb. This was a happy and healthy colony of honeybees, and they were not stinging me at all. After I removed all of the comb, the toilet was still full of bees, which told me the queen was in there. Suddenly I saw her crawling up the side of the tank. I put her in a clip to keep her safe, and I placed her in the new hive. Then I made a little bee bridge that led straight to the queen so the bees could easily get to their new hive. It worked, and the bees marched right in. After the bees started to recognize the bee box as their new home, I closed up the hive, I waited for the colony to move into the box, then we drove home, and it was another great day of saving the bees. I woke up one morning and my truck was covered with more bees than usual, so I ran outside in my pajamas to see what was going on. A swarm of bees that I caught the night before was leaving their hive and swarming again. I tried to offer their new hive back to them, but they weren't moving in very quickly, which told me that they wanted to go somewhere else. It was a race between me and the bees. I had to find the queen before the bees found a place to fly off to. After a few minutes, I found her. I put her in a clip to keep her safe, but before I could put her in the new hive, I had bees swarming to her in my hand. As soon as I put the queen in the hive, the bees began to go right in. I still had some bees on my hand who weren't leaving because they could still smell their queen on me. So I shook them off so they could find her. Within minutes, the entire colony was rushing to get back into their new hive. You can see how fast they were moving and how the queen was covered in bees. I waited for all the bees to get into their hive, and it was another great day of saving the bees in my pajamas.
Ya, Cata, voy a hacer así y me dices para donde tú quieras.
Ya.
Para. Por ahí. ¿Esta es tu carta?
Ya.
Bien, memorízala. Vamos a perderla por aquí, por la mitad de la baraja, y vamos a mezclar para que esté completamente perdida. Mira. Bien. Incluso para que sea más difícil, vas a mezclar tú. Mira, mezcla todas las cartas, así mezcla. Perfecto. Y vamos a encontrarlo de una manera diferente. Pero que tires todas las cartas a mis manos, tíralas.
Las tiro, ¿sí?
Tíralas.
Así.
Sí, perfecto. Así. Perfecto, mira. Me agarro una carta. Justamente. Es increíble, señores.
My friend, if you can't do push-ups, just like with everything else in the world, you can build up. Let me help. There's no reason to be ashamed if you can't do a push-up. Fitness is a journey and we all start somewhere. Plus, there are many kinds of push-ups. So we find one we can do, and we work it until we're strong enough to move on. We can start with some wall push-ups. Aim for 3 sets of 50. The reason you're doing so many is so you can practice your pushing motion. Next, we can do incline push-ups on a railing, table, or any stable surface. The lower the object, the harder. I recommend starting with something at least higher than your hips. Work these until you can do 3 sets of 40. Next, we finally go back to the ground, and we can do kneeling push-ups. And no, I never call these girl push-ups. This is a great therapy exercise that we don't need to shame, and I've never met a girl that likes them being called that. Anyway, work these until you can do 2 sets of 25. And then you should be strong enough to do a regular full push-up. Congratulations! If you start getting joint pain, you may have progressed too quickly. Go back to some of the easier variations. Sometimes our muscles are strong enough to move on, but our joints are not. If you're interested, I have a full YouTube video on this that I'll link in the comments. Have a beautiful day.
I guess I'm just a playdate to you.
always playing board games. I wish I had Monopoly.
I didn't think we used to have so many servants. A big country house in the 19th century might have 40 indoor servants, plus maybe 70 odd more outdoor servants. There are a couple of reasons. Partly, there was just a lot more work to do back then. Stainless steel hadn't been invented yet, so instead of just washing a knife, you had to treat it as well every single time you used it to stop it rusting. Gas lamps cover everything with a hard black grime. If you want a single bath, somebody has to carry in and heat up all that water. In a big country house like this, you're a long way from Tesco's, so you're going to be making a lot of stuff in-house rather than buying it. Medicine, ink, candles, toothpaste, boot polish, soap, cosmetics, jam, beer, butter. And partly because everything has to be cleaned to the kinds of standards that only occur to people who don't have to do the work. At Manderson House in Scotland, the servants had to completely disassemble, polish, and then reassemble the Great Staircase twice a year.
Line them up, and I got them. Oh, no. Crazy.